welcome to another edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. We have a great show for you today. We were talking about yesterday how it's been a little bit quiet to start the month. It is no longer quiet. We are going to talk about a big-time bombshell that could affect the future of college football that dropped yesterday. Then we're going to jump into who I actually think can win the national title. Kirby Smart had some comments on an ESPN Q&A that has ignited quite the debate around this topic. How many teams? Is there only 5, or is there more close to 12 teams that can actually pull it off? And then we'll get into another edition of the team slogans going into 2024. We did the top dogs, the clear-cut contenders in the first segment, so we've gotten to kind of the people right under that. The people still have a chance for a title, but are definitely in Tier 2 as we go into the season. And then we have another Hot Take Thursday for you, and today we're talking about who I think is going to absolutely dominate this year. There are tons of very, very talented young guys in particular that I'm very much looking forward to, so stick around till the end to see that. But before we jump in here, I do want to remind you all we get tons of questions and comments throughout the show, and the best way for you all to see your questions or comments on the screen, have a kind of interactive experience here, is to use the tip and donation link at the bottom of the screen, gsmcpodcast.net. It's a huge help not only to us here at the network, but to you all. You get to see your questions on the screen, we get to have a fun back and forth here, and maybe make the segment a little bit more interesting by hearing from someone other than me. But let's jump right in because we had a major bombshell drop yesterday. It looks like there is a group called College Sports Tomorrow that is starting to put together a proposal around a super league in college football. And if you've heard that term before, it's likely from the soccer super league that was being put together over in Europe that got a lot of pushback and didn't end up getting put together, but it included all of the incredible teams that everyone pretty much knows: Liverpool, Barcelona, Real Madrid, Chelsea, all of the incredible teams that have the most money, let's put it that way. But they had this idea to possibly bring a version of that over to college football. Andrew Marchand and Stuart Mandel have been all over this, and it's a really interesting idea. I think that it comes from a lot of different perspectives, and you could have a ton of different takes on them, and I'm kind of a little bit in between, I'll be totally honest with you. But the overarching idea essentially is to have a single governing body over college football. It would get NIL in check, it would get the transfer portal in check, to where you have clear guidelines, clear rules, clear ways things go about. So that's a great thing, obviously, and that's something that we've been kind of yearning for in college football, but that is just the tip of the iceberg. Let's talk about kind of the football part of this and the actual on-field implications. So the current outline is about the top 70 programs in the country, so all the members of the 5 major conferences, so Oregon State and Washington State are included in this. You add Notre Dame and SMU, who is going into the ACC this upcoming year, will be permanent members of this Super League. Their status is unchanging. They are not in danger in any way. And then the rest of the 130 plus FBS schools, so I think it's about 133 if I'm not mistaken. So about split roughly around the middle. Obviously, it's about 70 to 63 of teams that are firmly in the field, and then teams that are fighting to get in the field. And this is where it gets a little bit interesting, because the perpetual members will be split into 7 10-team divisions. So there will be, depending how they break that up, I'm not exactly sure. I don't know if it's going to be a tiered system or evenly distributed. They didn't really go into too much detail because this is still a very new concept, but definitely very interesting. But there is a 8th division that will have 10 teams in it as well that can be promoted from the second tier. So these teams that are not permanently in, the ones that are not a part of the top 70 programs, will have to play their way into the league, essentially. And the confusion for me kind of lies of how many teams. Obviously they start with 10 teams in that 8th league, but how many teams get to stay? How do you decide if anyone gets to stay, or is it always just a rotating cast of 10 new teams every single year? I'm a little uncertain of that. It didn't go into too much detail on that part of it, but it looks like at the very least there's going to be 80 teams in this thing in total, and with a rotating cast of at least a handful of them at the bottom of this tiering system. So the 50 plus second division teams would have the opportunity to compete into the upper division, like we just talked about, into that eighth division that we just talked about. And it would create kind of a promotion structure. And I know there have been some people in college football that have been pushing for that. The European football leagues use that religiously, and it's been a great way for them to go about business. Obviously, a very different proposition over here, but at the end of the day, definitely a really interesting twist to the game that would be fun to watch at the very least. And then you have the 7 permanent teams that are in no danger of moving down. The second division teams would have the incentive of promotion and relegation to keep them moving, but the 70 permanent teams would just kind of be sitting pretty for the most part. So I think there's still a little bit of confusion around all of this. I think we will start to piece together more stuff as more information comes out on how all of this is going to work and the structure and, the real pushing factors behind this, the real promoter factors behind this. But as of right now, we know that the playoff is not going to require a selection committee. That is a big part of their pitch because the selection committee has been a hot topic of debate, especially over the last couple of years. So they will have 8 division winners, so the 8 teams that win their 10-team division, and then we'll have 8 wild cards. And that will be essentially from the top tier. They will use just the best record and tiebreakers like the NFL. So kind of an interesting situation. Obviously, I believe it'll be split up where it's 10 teams that are split up evenly. So essentially, this would do away with conferences alignments, and we'll get to that here in a second. But it's a crazy idea. Let's call it what it is. I mean, college football would be changed in essentially every single way possible. In so many ways, there would be certain things taken from us, like the regionality, like the conference championships, like the conference ties. But a lot of things would be given to us. Some, interesting relegation promotion situation, not having to deal with the playoff committee that makes us mad so often. So there are definitely some pros. There are definitely some cons. I'm kind of still working out my opinion on all this. It came out late yesterday, so have had a little time to process it. But I think the one biggest problem I have with this, or there are a couple that I have with this, and I'll start with just kind of the structure of the whole thing. I think 70 permanent teams is a little ridiculous to me. And now I fully understand you're trying to protect the big programs in the sport. Those are the ones that bring in money. You never want a situation where Notre Dame has a down year and falls down into the second division, and you can't, you lose a big chunk of revenue that comes in from them. I totally understand that aspect of it, but college football is skewed. We know that. It's one of the more skewed sports in, the world of sports for the most part, because of recruiting, because of the ability to just financially be in a better spot than other schools. But I think the people that are in charge of college football, their responsibility is to make it as even-keeled as possible, make it as fair footing as possible for these kids. And I think the biggest question is, what happens if Notre Dame does have a down year, or Texas has a down year, or Georgia, they go 3-9? Do they really deserve to be a part of those 70 permanent teams where they can kind of, take the year off, move on to the next year, and not have to worry about their status? I think the best way to do this would essentially be have everyone is up for promotion, and you make it a more tiered system, a more maybe a little bit more complex, but it might just be a little bit more interesting. And also, it would keep some teams in it, and it would possibly bring up some teams that are currently on the outside looking in this second tier that consists of about 50 plus teams. To now everything is on the table for them, even long term, where if you start working your way up these ranks, you get more notoriety, you get more money, you get more ability to recruit the top athletes. So although I fully understand the impulse to protect the big dogs, to protect the teams that have been such a huge part of college football in the last couple of years and right now dominate college football, but I do think that if you're going to set up a future for college football that protects the, elite of the elite, you're setting it up in a way that is not necessarily in the best interest for the sport. Now, it might be in the best interest for these people, but I wouldn't necessarily say it benefits the sport as a whole, just because it takes a massive, massive group of teams just fully out of the conversation pretty much from the get-go. So that would be one of the biggest things I have with the structure of it. But the back end of this, the people behind it, I think, are very powerful people. There's no two ways about it. There are a number of people, one that is involved with the NFL that we'll get to here in a second, one that is involved in a lot of placement of conference commissioners around the country. So there are some people that really, really matter in the world of college football, and you wouldn't know their faces if you saw them, but they definitely do have a lot of power over the sport. And it's not that I don't trust these people or I think they are necessarily bad people by any means. I think they have, good intentions when coming at this, but it does, as the European Super League reeked of people just trying to make the most money and leaving the classic part of the sport out of it. This reeks of the same exact thing. And it's not necessarily that they couldn't pull it off to keep kind of some of the majesty, some of the tradition, some of the pageantry of the sport, but it's going to be really hard to. And the way that they've set it up now, the way I look at it is this is a financial play. This is a kind of cash cow type thing, and I would be a little surprised if currently their biggest worry was what's best for the players, what's best for the sport. I think their worry is what's best for, our bank accounts. And, that's all well and good. That's the game that we're playing, I suppose. But I think when we talk about the sport, there's a massive disconnect of what people that are actually making the decisions think is wrong with the sport and what fans think is wrong with the sport. So we're kind of going in two different directions. But the biggest problem I have with this is I actually think it could work. I think there are a lot of people in the sport that are just searching for answers. And I talked about it when Nick Saban went in front of Capitol Hill and talked about NIL and everything, that we shouldn't, turn up our noses at people that try to give solutions. So I will absolutely hear this out and, look into more and more details about this and come to a final conclusion. But I think people in college football just want structure. I think coaches just want the ability to know what's going on, to have the rules in place, and if it comes at the expense of some of the tradition that the sport has, I think they would take that trade, to be totally honest with you, at this moment in time. Now, this is still a ways away, I'll be honest. There is some good news in all of this when I talk about, the possibility of this happening down the road. It seems like we still have some work to do to get there. It looks like the ACC met with this group. That is no surprise to me. I'll be totally honest with you. They are looking for a lifeline anywhere they can get it, if I'm being totally honest. But the Big Ten, the SEC, and the Big 12 all called off their meetings with this group. So I wouldn't say they're close. I guess I'll put it that way. And it's not necessarily that they couldn't be close very quickly, because it seems like from the Big Ten, SEC, and Big 12, they're mainly worried about upsetting ESPN, upsetting Fox, their current TV partners, by doing something totally different from what they're doing now and kind of throwing a wrench into all that, because then you got to set up totally new media deals. So if this really wants to continue, the people that they have to get on board are the people that make decisions in this sport, which is Fox and ESPN. So I think there's going to be a ton of push around that from this group recently. I think it's going to be really, really interesting to see how all this develops, because there will be people that are very powerful in the sport that want this to happen. I have no doubt in my mind, because to be totally honest, it would be a remarkable cash cow. They would make just insane amounts of money broadcasting this sport and putting out all of the content from this sport, because it would make for a lot of really good matchups. It would keep your team safe, so you would know you're tuning in every single year. With NIL being more regulated, I think kids would continue to stay in college longer, and you would have players that you gain real bond with and actually, care about, instead of, seeing guys walk in one day and walk out the other. So there are some good parts to this. There's no two ways about it. I think people will definitely hear this out, and this is definitely not the last time that we will hear about the Super League in college football, but it is quite a ways away. I will put that in there, because as of right now, 3 of the conferences that they absolutely need on board are not on board. And if they can get ESPN and Fox on board, then things happen very, very quickly. I promise you that. But I think for the time being, at least, this is more of an idea that has 2% of the traction that it needs to get to where it's going. So it'll be really interesting to see all this develop. I think, to be totally honest, when I look at something like a Super League or something like the proposal that is put forth by College Sports Tomorrow, I don't see college football. I see, a version of an amalgamation of different sports. And here's the thing about college football: it's different, and it should be. For whatever reason, the people that are fully in charge of the sport don't understand that the fans of the sport like that it's different. We like that it's specific and regional, and we have conference foes and all of that great stuff. And it's being taken away from us through conference realignment, through NIL and the transfer portal and all of this different stuff. But if this were to happen, we're no longer playing college football. We're playing a professional form of football that just happens to bear the name of a college. So, I love to sit here and say and rejoice that we have someone that's stepping up to the plate and giving us an answer. And I'm more than happy to hear them out and see how this kind of goes. But as of right this second, this is definitely something I've had a nightmare about. I'll be totally honest. So not very excited about this idea. I don't necessarily think it's very close to happening, so I wouldn't necessarily stress yourself out too much, but something to keep on the mind for sure. College football is changing very quickly, and people are taking advantage of the state that it's in right now, where we have essentially no answers. But that was a relatively longer segment, so I will come to a break here. And when we come back, we're going to talk about who can actually win the national title. Kirby Smart had some interesting comments about the 12-team playoff, and if it actually does increase the chances of these lower-level teams getting a title. So I'll break down who I actually think can win it and my thoughts on that general statement right after this.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about a crazy new idea that was floated out there yesterday of a super league in college football. So if you want to check out that segment, you could definitely check it out. But let's jump into a new debate that has sparked the last couple of days. Kirby Smart had an interesting comment in an ESPN Q&A where he talked about the 12-team playoff and did say, yes, it does keep teams alive throughout the season where you can have a loss, you can have two losses at some point in the season and continue on marching, but he didn't necessarily think that increased the chances of those teams winning a title at the end of the whole thing. So I wanted to give my take on, first of all, what he said, and then give you the teams that I think actually have a chance to win this title. So first of all, I do understand what he's saying. It's something that, frankly, I've thought for quite some time. I think the 12-team playoff is a great way to get a ton of different teams into the spotlight, to get a ton of different teams into the playoff, have them play that first round game or that second round game, and show who they are and get their brand on national television and definitely build some great things. But the reality is, they now have to win 3 games to be a Cinderella run. They don't have to just win one. So TCU in 2022, that was remarkable. It was an incredible run that they went on. Max Duggan coming in as a backup quarterback in the first game of the season and lighting the world on fire was not something that a lot of people thought was going to happen. And especially them getting to the national title, going into that matchup against Michigan, no one thought was going to happen. So but it ended up happening because they were better on that day. And that is a huge part of sports. Sometimes it's just people have it, some people don't. So TCU was just cooking that day, and they won the game, went to the national title, and got railroaded, don't get me wrong, but absolutely had that moment in the spotlight. Now, if they were going to pull that off, they have to win a game likely on another team's campus. Then they have to win a semifinal game against a team that has been off for 2 weeks and has gotten healthy, and then they have to win another game against one of the top teams in the country before they even get to the championship. So this idea that we will see these remarkable Cinderella runs, I think it's still in the cards. I think that's still a possibility. There are teams out there that have that ability in them, but it's going to be really tough. And I think one of the big reasons for that is when you look up and down rosters across the country, there are teams that stand out in top-level talent across the country. There are teams that have a great 22 starting lineup across the country, whether it's Utah or Kansas State, or you can talk about teams even like Nebraska that has a really good group of players up there right now. There are tons of teams. Penn State has a great 22. Miami has a great 22. The problem is you don't just need 22 players to win a national championship. You need your 2 deep to be great. You need your 3 deep to be great, if I'm being totally honest. When you look at these past couple of champions, particularly the 2 Georgia teams and Michigan this past year, the depth was just ridiculous across both those teams. They could have had numerous injuries on the defensive side of the ball in particular and still continued rolling. And in fact, they did. I mean, Georgia has had injuries throughout that time in the 2022 season. For sure, they had a couple of injuries that really held them back. So there are tons of things that kind of go into this, and health is a huge thing, and luck goes into absolutely every single title. So having that ability to stay healthy, and if you can't stay healthy, having the ability to go to your 2 deep and feel okay is something that not everyone has. A lot of people have, the starting lineup. Not a lot of people have the 2 deep or the 3 deep that is necessary to win titles. And a lot of the teams that do have it reside in the SEC and the Big Ten. So I tend to believe that, yes, this is mostly true. I think there's definitely truth to the idea that when you look up and down these rosters, teams like Georgia, teams like Ohio State, teams like Bama, they can deal with these losses on, a position or two, or they can, rotate a guy in if someone on the offensive line isn't playing up to where they see fit. So they have the ability to kind of play around with their roster because they have 44 or 66 guys on their roster that would be playing in a number of different programs across the country. Not everyone does that, and not everyone can say that. So it's going to be really tough for the TCUs of the world, if you will, to make their way into the playoff. And then, well, it'll be easier for them to make their way into the playoff, I will say that. It's going to be a ton harder for them to make the run in the playoff that a lot of people have fallen in love with, and a lot of people have given a reason for expanding it. But at the end of the day, I think it's one of those things that more football is fun. Having more teams, at least on those national stages, will be fun. Whether or not those games will be very competitive, I think, is very much up for debate. But let's jump into who I think actually can win the national championship. And I broke it up into 3 different tiers. I think there's kind of 3 groups of teams that have the ability. It's just varying chances to pull that off. So let's start with the clear-cut contenders, the people that are, bar none, there's really no chance, barring some remarkable drop, they will be in the conversation. They will be towards the top of the pecking order pretty much all year. And let's start with Georgia. That's a duh. Georgia's going to be in the conversation for a very, very long time. And if Carson Beck is their quarterback, which he's going to be in 2024, they're going to be terrifying on offense. So I would not worry about Georgia. They will absolutely be in the conversation. Ohio State, another duh. A lot of people on particularly Twitter that have no profile picture will tell you that Ryan Day cannot win the big one. He just hasn't yet. He absolutely has the ability, and he is doing a lot of things up there to make sure that happens. So Ohio State, absolutely. Texas, when you look at that roster, it's just off the charts. It is as deep as there is in the country. And when you look at the roster 3 years ago, before Sark came in, it was very far from that. So he's done incredible work in his 3 years, and the time is now. You have Quinn Ewers in his 3rd year. Everything's rolling in Austin, Texas. And then Oregon, absolutely in the conversation. Transfer portals players do have to hit, but the talent and the experience of those transfer portal players makes that a lot easier. And the talent is just off the charts. Dylan Gabriel coming in is a huge addition, so feel really good about the Oregon Ducks going into this year. And then Bama. The aforementioned people on Twitter will tell you that Bama has fallen off, that they're done without Saban. Don't buy it. I'll talk about them tomorrow. I'll talk about a little bit about what the first couple of months have been under Kalen DeBoer. They'll be just fine in 2024. I'll put it that way. Now let's get to the teams that I'm dubbing the if the stars align teams. There's a couple of things that need to happen for these teams for them to hit that next level, but if they do, things could happen very, very quickly. And let's start with Michigan. They are the obvious team. If quarterback and wide receiver hits, watch out. If Alex Orji can handle this offense the same way that J.J. McCarthy did, plus the athletic ability that he has, this team gets very interesting because the defense is going to be downright awesome. So I'm not worried about that, but the quarterback is a big worry. And then Tennessee, Nico Iamaleava is capable of literally anything in his first starting year, going into his sophomore year of college. He could have a Hendon Hooker type year. I think Tennessee fans would tell you that, but he is someone that has every ability to light the world on fire and get Tennessee in conversations that there might be some Tennessee fans that don't even think they'll be in those conversations. And then Penn State, Drew Aller, same thing as Nico Iamaleava, going into his 2nd year. He did start last year, which definitely helps him, but his talent, in my opinion, is undeniable. He has a rocket for an arm. He can do a ton of really good things. Bringing Andy Kotelnicki into that offense as offensive coordinator is absolutely huge for him. If he can hit another gear, then this Penn State team is capable of a lot of things. And then Ole Miss, big-time transfer portal class. All of those guys got to hit, pretty much all of them. Especially on that defensive line. Walter Nolan will be just fine. I don't worry about him, but they have some other guys that absolutely have to hit, plus some younger guys that need to step up. We talked about Centurion Perkins earlier this week. He is someone that I'm definitely keeping my eye out on. And then Jackson Dart in year 3. We talked about Quinn Ewers. It absolutely gives him a leg up that Jackson Dart is in year 3 of Lane Kiffin's offense up there. LSU is another team I would put in this category. Garrett Nussmeier is the guy finally. I think his ceiling is higher than some people might fully understand. I think he is genuinely a guy that could be one of the top, if not the top quarterback in the 2026 NFL draft. So a little bit down the road, but I think he has that type of ability. Florida State, if DJ Uiagalelei hits early, this team can be right where they were in 2023. The defense is going to be a nightmare to deal with, even with all the guys that they had going out. They have so much talent on that defensive side of the ball. So really like this team. It just comes down to some of those offensive transfers hitting the way that they've hit in the past for Mike Norvell. And then Clemson, another ACC team. Cade Klubnik and Garrett Riley hold the keys to Clemson's success. If they hit, then Clemson hits. If they struggle the way they did last year, Clemson fans are going to be a little bit upset in fall for sure. And then Missouri, the new defensive staff just has to hit. They lost a ton of guys, mostly to LSU it seemed, with Blake Baker, their defensive coordinator, making his way down to Baton Rouge. But plenty of ability on that defensive side of the ball. If the defensive staff can hit, they should be rolling. And then Brady Cook and Luther Burden can hit heights that Missouri fans even, I don't think, can dream of, honestly. I think these guys can be as good of a quarterback and wide receiver duo as there is in the country. And then the final group of teams, the door is open, so they could win, is the group that I have here. And it's a lot of Big 12 teams, I'll be honest. I don't think there's quite a team that is technically national championship caliber, but there's teams that have the ability. I mean, the door's going to be open. They could kick it right open. So, Avery Johnson for Kansas State to start here. Avery Johnson is an absolute game changer. If he catches on fire, he can do anything, literally anything this year. I think he is capable of so much more than even Kansas State fans might think, because he is just remarkable with his legs, with his arms. I think he can do something that would light the college football world on fire. He could win a Heisman for all I know. I mean, the dude's ability is off the charts. And then Utah, another Big 12 team, they're going to play really tough football. They're going to be in every single game. If Cam Rising is healthy, they know that they win conferences in the Pac-12. I mean, in 2021 and 2022, they won the Pac-12. So that gets you into the party. And then you'll have one of the best coaches in the country in Kyle Whittingham, and a Cam Rising that is very experienced and very confident. So I would feel good about Utah if they got into the dance, but still would be very, very tough for them to win a national title. Miami's another team I put on here, a lot like Avery Johnson example. Cam Ward is the exact same. If he hits the heights that he's capable of, the Hurricanes are going to be a lot better than people might expect them to be right now. This dude is an absolute game changer, and if he can, unlock that extra gear of his game that he definitely has in there, I think this team's heights are remarkable, to be totally honest with you. And then Arizona has Noah Fafita and Tatori McMillan, and that's really the only reason. I think they have a Mac Jones, Devontae Smith type year in the cards. Very unlikely, I'll be totally honest, but it's somewhere in there, and they definitely have a connection that is unlike anything else in the country. And then I snuck in Colorado here. There's too much talent for them to not necessarily have a shot, but it's a very, very slim shot. I'll put it that way. Deciding who's going to win a title in April is insanely tough and kind of a crapshoot, I'll be totally honest. But I do think this is the group that it will come from. I would be insanely surprised if there was someone outside this group that made the noise necessary to win a national title. So that's the group I'm going with. I'm going to stick with it. If it comes back to bite me, so be it, I suppose. But we're going to take our second break here, and when we come back, we're going to do team slogans. We've done this before with the clear-cut contenders that we just talked about, but now it's time to get to the rest of the group. Definitely some teams that have big-time years coming up in 2024, so wanted to give them kind of a slogan, a mantra, a motto, whatever you want to call it, to come back to throughout the 2024 season. So stick with us, and we will be right back with that.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about the teams that can actually win a national title in 2024. I gave my picks, split them up into 3 different groups, so if you want to check that out, you can definitely check out that segment. But now let's get to team slogans. We have done this before with the clear-cut contenders that we talked about in the last segment, but time to get to the second-tier teams, if you will. And we'll start in State College with the Penn State Nittany Lions, and the slogan I'm going with is not the same old Nittany Lions. I think everyone, if you are a college football fan, whether it is a casual fan or a diehard fan, you know Penn State is a 10-2 team. They have been that way for quite some time. Everyone in State College knows that. Everyone that watches college football knows that. It doesn't need to be the case this year, though, to be totally honest. All of the things that were not in place at Penn State for the past couple of iterations are finally in place, it feels like. I didn't think they ever had an elite talent at quarterback. I think Drew Aller is an elite talent. He hasn't hit his ceiling yet, but I think his ceiling is remarkably high. They have new coordinators, which is absolutely huge. Defensive coordinator has never really been a problem. They've always had a really solid guy. In fact, their defensive coordinator, Manny Diaz, just got hired at Duke to be their head coach. So that's not the problem side of the ball. The offensive side has been a little bit tougher, and Andy Kotelnicki coming in from Kansas is absolutely a difference maker. If he hits, I think this team is fully ready to step into the spotlight and prove they are not the same old Nittany Lions. And then Ole Miss, the classic, the go-to for a lot of teams, the why not us. I think Ole Miss has been the team that a lot of people have been watching throughout the offseason. The portal class is just remarkable. Walter Nolan kind of leading that group. Jackson Dart going into his 3rd year. You have Trey Harris. You have Juice Wells, a transfer from South Carolina. Caden Priestcorn. So many incredible weapons on that team, and the talent on that team is just off the charts. Lane Kiffin is sitting right under that top line of head coaches for a couple years now, and I think he's finally ready to break through. This would be the year to do it. So I think their messaging is just, we brought in this really diverse group from a ton of different teams, from a ton of different places. A lot of people are wondering, can we put it together? Let's prove them wrong. Let's say, why not us, and find our way into the playoff, and then the talent is there to make a run, like we just talked about. And then Tennessee, the way I look at it, it is repeat 2022 and you're in. I know that 2022 is kind of somewhat a sore subject for Tennessee fans, even though they had so much success. The way that it ended left a sour taste in their mouth for sure, but if there was a 12-team playoff in 2022, Tennessee is in. Obviously, they did struggle towards the end of the season. If Hendon Hooker was healthy, they're definitely in. They might be in regardless if Hendon Hooker was healthy, but Nico Iamaleava is the guy that they wanted out of Joe Milton last year. He is the quarterback that Joe Milton isn't, and he is much closer to what Hendon Hooker is. In fact, I think he kind of splits the middle of them pretty beautifully. I think his touch and ability to layer balls is elite. His arm strength is pretty wild considering his size. I think he can meet the expectations of Hendon Hooker in 2022, and honestly, I think he could even exceed him. He is so remarkable. The ceiling on this kid is just off the charts. But when you look at the repeat 2022 and in mantra, you do have to notice there is one big time difference between 2022 Tennessee and 2024, and it's the defensive side of the ball. And it's James Pierce Jr. in particular, the best edge in the country, in my opinion, an absolute difference maker. If he can get home a lot and be a game wrecker on defense, then this team gets very interesting very quickly because a pass rush opens up so many different things for a defense if you're not quite as talented on the back end as Tennessee is. But James Pierce Jr. is a game changer, and if him and Nico Iamaleava can hit their stride and hit their ceiling, watch out for this Tennessee team. That's the way I'll put it. And then LSU, it's the passing of the torch. Jaden Daniels is gone. The Heisman winner is out the door. The last time that happened was Joe Burrow, and things didn't go very well the year after. But I think things are going to be a little bit different this time, and it's because of Garrett Nussmeier. I think he is fully ready to take over. I've talked about him a number of times on here, and I feel like he's just itching to get on the football field. He is so ready to lead the LSU Tigers out of the tunnel and be the guy, and I think he's going to handle it really, really well. The defensive staff is just so much better than it was a year ago. I think it is the biggest turnaround in all of college football when you look at a staff perspective, because they hired a great defensive coordinator in Blake Baker from Missouri, got Bo Davis from Texas as a D-line coach, did so many incredible things on that defensive side of the ball. Corey Raymond coming back as their DB coach is huge for recruiting and for development. This defense is going to be better. There's no doubt about it. And I don't think this offense is going to take the step back that some people might think they are going to. But let's continue down the list here, and let's go to Kansas State in the Big 12. And for me, it's very simple. This is our conference. I think Kansas State, Texas, and OU are gone. The Big 12 can really belong to whoever wins it this year, and Kansas State is in a position to do that. They did win it in 2022, so there was some argument to be made that they already have some stake in this conference, but there are a lot of things changing. And in 2024, you can firmly plant that flag in this conference, say, we are the team to beat. We are the team that this conference is going to run through year in and year out. So get used to it. If you're Chris Kleiman and the Wildcats, you are fully ready to do that. And even with some great teams coming in, it shouldn't worry you. I think Kansas State is fully ready to not only become a team that wins the Big 12 every now and then, but the team that they look to every single offseason as the team to beat in the Big 12. And then another team that is coming in, Utah, is a team that I'm watching very closely, and it's kind of the exact opposite. It is a crash the party type of year for Utah. New conference, same exact goal. Utah's going to go out there, play tough. They're going to rough you up, punch you in the teeth a couple of times, and definitely be in the fight to win a conference title. That's just kind of what they do, especially with a healthy quarterback in Cam Rising. So I think Utah can do so many things. They can not only crash the Big 12 party, but the national party. If Cam Rising can stay healthy, if he can get back to kind of that 2022 Cam Rising that we remember so well, I think this team is capable of just so many things, and especially, as I said, crashing the party in the Big 12. They could be the team to beat instead of Kansas State. So huge year for both those teams. And then we'll finish it out with a couple of ACC teams here. Clemson, to start, in my opinion, the motto is the throne is still vacant. A lot of people have seen Clemson kind of slip over the last couple of years. A couple of different teams have won ACC titles when Clemson had an absolute stranglehold on the ACC for quite some time, right? For at least a 5-year period there throughout the last couple of years. And then last year came, and the last couple of years came, and Florida State had a remarkable year last year, no two ways about it. Won the ACC, went undefeated before that disaster down in Miami, but they are not necessarily the comfortable favorite in this conference. They have the exact same odds as Clemson does right now to win the conference, so the door is still wide open for Clemson to be at the head of the table. I think a lot of people are, like they're doing with Bama right now, kind of writing Clemson's death note, hoping that they are going to fall off into oblivion and not have to worry about them anymore, but that's likely not going to happen. And if 2024, if they can put it together, win the ACC, get back on top of that conference, I think Clemson might just be back to rolling the way that a lot of people don't want them to be. And then finally, we'll finish it off with Florida State. And to me, it's very clear. It's just harness the chaos. These past, 6 months for Florida State fans, for players, for coaches, for everyone at that university has been a little bit tense. You obviously had the playoff snub that made everyone very, very angry. You have the lawsuits against the ACC. Tons of people are praying for Florida State to not have the year that they had a year ago. And Mike Norvell and the Seminoles can shut out what they need to. They can, focus on what they need to, but also let some of that hate come in because it can fuel you in really, really great ways. So I think Florida State has arrived. I think they are at the table at the very least. And the question is, can they hang out for a little bit? 2024 is going to be a huge part of that. The transfers are going to be a massive part of their success. And if they can put it together again, I think people are talking about Mike Norvell and Florida State as the team that not only is here for a little bit of time, but the ACC might just be theirs after 2024. So tons going into this season for all of these teams. I think there are tons of talking points and great things to get into as we talk about slogans. So I would be surprised if that was the last edition of this segment. But we are going to take our final break here. When we come back, we have a Hot Take Thursday for you. And it has to do with who I think this 2024 season is going to belong to. So stick with us, and we will be right back with that.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just gave you some slogans for some teams going into 2024, a little motto that they can put above the door as they walk out and slap it as they go. But now it's time for another Hot Take Thursday, and this one is just about who I think this year is going to belong to, and it is the freshmen across college football. I have been going through spring practice notes and getting all of the stuff across the country, trying to compile as much spring intel as I possibly can. And the way that these freshmen are being talked about across the country is just different than every other year. Obviously, there are a number of years where kids pop up. There are definitely some freshmen every single year that have remarkable years and come onto campus and are ready to go. But I've noticed there is a little bit different of a vocabulary, I suppose, as they're talking about these freshmen this year. It's not just like he's flashing in practice, or this guy has all the traits, or he's going to be really good down the road. It's this dude is an absolute alpha right now, or he looks just totally different than everyone else on the field. So I wanted to go into some of the freshmen that I think are going to be standing out for the big-time contenders, and then we'll get into kind of the rest of the freshmen that will really define this season. So let's start with the clear-cut contenders that we talked about in the previous segment, and let's start with Texas. And two guys that are absolutely standing out are Ryan Wingo and Colin Simmons. Ryan Wingo has gotten the most amount of praise, as I have seen across college football. He is someone that is absolutely asserting himself into a starting role that a lot of people didn't think he was capable of getting. And then Colin Simmons has put on an insane amount of weight considering the amount of time he's been in Austin. He really looks the part. I think he's going to be insanely hard to keep off the field with how talented he is. And then he's just someone that you're just going to absolutely have to have. And then Ryan Wingo beating out three very high-level receivers they brought in from the portal is just remarkable. And then Ohio State, Jeremiah Smith is just doing crazy stuff in spring camp. He is mossing Denzel Burke, which is something I didn't think he was capable of this early on in his career. To be honest, I did not have it on my postseason bingo card that he would find a starting spot in this wide receiver group, but he seems to have, and it's just ridiculous that he was able to. But the talent is undeniable, the ability is undeniable, and he might just be the wide receiver one at Ohio State this upcoming year. Emeka Egbuka tends to be my pick right now, but the way that Jeremiah Smith is playing in spring, if he builds on that, it's going to get very interesting very quickly. And then let's go down to Athens, Georgia, and talk about the Bulldogs. Ellis Robinson Jr. and KJ Bolden, two guys on the back end of that defense. Ellis, a corner, and KJ Bolden, a safety. these are two guys that are just going to be really, really hard to keep off the field. The defensive back end is a little bit more solid than I had initially thought going into the offseason, but Ellis Robinson is already making jaw-dropping plays in practice. He made a crazy pick that I've seen a number of pictures of rolling around Dog's Twitter. And then KJ Bolden gets more and more talk as spring goes on. Apparently he is the ultimate professional, comes in every day, works his butt off, and then goes home and studies. So he is someone that they absolutely love over there, and I think both those guys will play big parts in 2024. And then Bama, another team that we talked about earlier. Ryan Williams and Jalen Mbakwe are going to be huge for this team. Wide receiver room is a little bit interesting for Bama. Plenty of talent in that room, but not as much experience. Ryan Williams is the exact same, obviously, but the talent for him is just absolutely off the charts. He could definitely be a wide receiver one for them. No one has really stepped into that role. I think Jalen Hale is a remarkable guy in that room, but I think Ryan Williams, if it's not this year, it's definitely next year where he is going to be the alpha, the wide receiver one in that room and kind of take full control. And then Jalen Mbakwe is someone that this back end of that defense got a little bit gutted during the portal cycle, and he's someone that's got to come in and be ready to go. He is flashing in spring practice, so I think he's someone that could definitely jump off the page very early on in 2024. And then Oregon to round out the clear-cut contenders here. Gatlin Bear and Elijah Rushing are two guys that I'm watching very closely for kind of different reasons. One guy is just a position of need, Elijah Rushing at edge. He's a remarkable athlete, could definitely find his way on the field, even if they didn't need edge rushing, but they absolutely do up in Eugene, so I think he will find the field very early. And then when you talk about Gatlin Bear, it's just going to be impossible to keep this guy off the field because the speed is just insane. Whether it's returning punts or gadget plays, I'm not sure exactly how they're going to use him, but he's going to make plays for Oregon in the fall, and the plays are going to become more plentiful as you go on throughout the season, and he becomes more comfortable in that environment. But now that we're through with the big-time teams and the freshmen that can make impacts for them, let's go across the country and talk about the rest of the guys that could have big-time effects for their teams as we go into 2024. And I think Florida actually kind of leads this charge in a weird way. You have LJ McCray down there, a fantastic defensive lineman that almost definitely will play. I feel very confident in that, and I think he'll play early. His talent is undeniable, and that's a position that they're probably going to need a little bit of help in for the Gators. So I would be surprised if we didn't see a lot of LJ McCray in 2024. And then you talk about DJ Lagway, a guy that came in as a big-time quarterback and someone that Florida fans are putting, I don't want to say unreasonable pressure, but he is being dubbed as kind of the savior of the program, if that's the best way to put it, I suppose. I think he will likely not see the field in 2024 unless there is an injury to Graham Mertz, but if his time comes, I would not be surprised if he never looked back, because this dude's talent, this dude's ability is just mind-boggling at times. And then in Auburn, we've talked about him countless times, it feels like at this point. Cam Coleman is going to be wide receiver one at Auburn. I feel very, very good about that at this point. I think he is going to be an absolute difference maker, and if Auburn's going to be kind of the party crasher that they're capable of being, Cam Coleman's going to be a huge part of that. Then let's go to Colorado and Jordan Seaton, a huge pickup at the offensive lineman. He's probably going to play left tackle if I had to imagine, and that's a huge position, obviously. Protecting Shadur Sanders' blindside is the most important part for this Colorado success, and Jordan Seaton has that responsibility going into 2024. He has a big-time spotlight on him. He has the ability to deliver on the hype, but it's going to be tough, and he's going to go through some growing pains, I'm sure, but the capability is off the charts. So very excited to see what he can do. I think he's definitely more than capable of making big-time plays. And then Williams Nawari, a player that is going to Missouri at the edge position. They lost some guys on that defensive line, mainly Darius Robinson to the NFL draft, and they're going to need younger guys to step in, and Williams Nawari is an absolute game changer on the defensive side of the ball. I think he could be someone that not only changes the complexion of Missouri season, but the SEC overall, because Missouri is one of those teams that is sitting right under the Georgia and Texas and Bamas of the world that are gearing up to make a lot of noise. And then, in fact, I think Nowari could be the most impactful guy that I've said so far on this list, to be totally honest. And the reason I said so far on this list is we have Dylan Raiola at the very end here. He is the most impactful freshman in the country, bar none. There's really no contest for a number of reasons. It's obviously he is a quarterback. Obviously he is starting, but he's starting at the school that his dad went to. He had a recruiting battle between Georgia and Nebraska that got a lot of headlines. A lot of people were not too kind to him as he went through that process. He has infinite amount of eyes on him that are rooting on his downfall, as they say. They have plenty of eyes on him that are hoping he is the savior of the program, that Florida has given DJ Lagway the privilege of being the savior of the program. But Dylan Raiola has the weight of the world on his shoulders. There's really no debate about that, and I think he's someone that the ability is absolutely there. He is built like an NFL quarterback today. He is just remarkable physically, but he is a freshman in the Big Ten, and it's going to be very, very interesting. But if he puts it together, if he becomes the player that a lot of people think he's capable of being, and he becomes it in his freshman year, things get really interesting for the Cornhuskers, because the Big Ten, while not, totally wide open, Ohio State, Oregon, and Michigan are kind of still sitting up there at the top, but Nebraska is a team that is very, very sneaky, and if Dylan Raiola especially can put it together, then they become downright scary pretty quickly. So I'd be very interested to see what he can do. He is the most impactful freshman. He is the freshman that you will see the most headlines about and you will hear the most talk about, because he's got a lot on his shoulders. There's no two ways about that. But very excited to see how he responds. Very excited to see how all these guys respond. I think this freshman class, not only was it talented when they came in, and people had a lot of expectations for this group, but they're proving to be as talented as we thought. They are proving every point that people have made for quite some time about this group, and even more so. All these guys are just showing out to the nth degree and doing just remarkable things the second they stepped on campus. So I think there's going to be just a remarkable group. We could have one or two All-Americans among this group because of how talented, and some of them are just stepping into positions where they got to be effective. So it'll be really interesting to see all that develop. I love this freshman class, and I think 2024 might just belong to them. So it'll be very interesting to see how that develops. But that will do it for this edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It does make a huge difference for us. We also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, all of the social channels for all of the updates, all of the content that we put out. We put out insane amounts of content every day across every single sport you could think of. So if you're not only a college football guy like myself, if you love basketball, Nelson has you. If you love wrestling, my guy Eric has you. If you love just sports overall, TJ or Jeremy have you. So tons of incredible people around here doing great work, and I think we have you covered with literally everything you could possibly need to know in the world of sports. So definitely check out all the pages for that. But thank you once again for listening, and I will see you guys tomorrow.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow.